Hello friends, thank you for watching this video. I am Mohamad and today we're going to be discussing ASP.NET Core Authorization. We're going to be discussing roles, claims, and policies. And when are we going to be using every single one of them? So let's see what's on the agenda for today. First, we're going to be discussing authentication versus authorization. When are we going to be using authentication? When are we going to be using authorization? And how do they work together? Then we're going to be discussing the different authorization type. What's its role? What's a claim? What's a policy? And how do they fit together? And when should we use every single one of them? As well, we're going to be discussing the ingredients for our code. And then we're going to be jumping into our source code. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. It will really help the channel. As well, you're going to find the source code in the description down below. Now let's jump into it. So the first thing that we're going to be discussing is authentication versus authorization. So before we jump deep into the topic of authorization, we need to see and understand what's the difference between these two and how do they fit together. So as we can see here from the graph, we can see that the first step is always going to be authentication and then it's going to be authorization. So authentication is the act of validating that the user claims who are they claimed to be. So basically, it's going to be the first step of any security process. So for example, if I'm trying to access the system, for example, I have an account there, I need to provide my username and my password, and then the system is going to be able to verify my credentials. And then once it verifies my credential, if they are correct, it will be either give me access to the system. If they're not correct, it's going to be ejecting me out. So that's the process of actually validating the information that I give to that system, and then it will basically allow me to enter through the main gates so I can access the application. So authentication is the ability to actually the system identify who this person is and if they have actually the right information for them to enter to the system. So that's going to be the first thing. And authentication here can be in different types. So there could be sometimes we can use email and password. Sometimes we can have a one-time pass. Sometimes we can have some biometric information. And sometimes we can have those authenticator apps where they generate random codes. And we can actually input those codes in order for us to access the system. And authentication could not be a single step. So we can have multi-factor authentication as well in order for us to make the system more secure. If you want to learn more about multi-factor authentication, I have a video which actually delves deep into multi-factor authentication, how it works and how everything fits together. So that's the first step, which is going to be authentication. And as we can see here in much more detail, it's going to be the level 1 of authentication, which actually directly having a username and a password, and then actually verifying the credential. And if it actually is correct, we can actually access the system. So our access has been granted. If it's not correct, we get an invalid credential and we go back to the login screen. And here as well, on top of that, we can actually add some more code into it. So we can, for example, deny the user to try again after 3 wrong tries, and we can make the system more secure by adding, again, multi-factor authentication. There is a lot of stuff that we can do, but the basic information about authentication is actually taking the user credential, verify them. If they are correct, we grant access. If they're not, we actually reject that request and wait for the user to input another set of credentials. Now, what is authorization? So authorization comes always after authentication. So once the user have provided the correct credentials and they are we can verify who they actually are. So they have provided the right username and password. If we're using multi-factor authentication, they provided the right codes or the right biometric information. Now it's time for us to actually give them what can they do within the system. We need to give them the actual set of rules or set of guidelines that they can actually utilize when they are inside the system. What can they do? Do they have admin roles? Do they have admin credentials where they are able to do anything they want? Do they have only limited set of access? So they can only, for example, view certain stuff. They can actually generate some documents. Or do they have, for example, access to certain set of modules? So are they customer support? They only have access to the customer support section. Are they, for example, marketing, where they can actually access the marketing section of our application? And so on and so forth. There is a lot of set of rules that we need to actually add to the user or actually give to the user once they actually authenticate. And we need to give them those authorization rules in order for them to access a different part of the system. So as we can see here, we have these two graphs and we have user 1 and user 2. So both of these users actually have passed through the authentication phase. Both of them have provided correct username and a password, and if there is any multi-factor authentication, they have provided the right one, and now the system has granted them access. But both of them, after they have granted access, they have different set of access in the system. So we can see user one has a more of an admin role where they have access to every single functionality inside the system. On the other hand, the user two has an inventory role where has only access to a single functionality inside the system. So here authorization play a major role in setting those rules, and it plays a major role into identifying and separating the different types of user types. So what are the different types of authorization? Basically, we have three major types of authorization. We have role-based, we have claims, and we have policy. And it might sound confusing for now. So what's the difference between a role, what a claim, what a policy? We're going to be delving more deep into every single one of them, and we're going to be discussing how they work and how we can actually make them work together. So the first thing we're going to be discussing is role base. So what is a role base? We can set of a role base is like the set of permission that we actually have inside the system. So as we saw from the previous one, so a role base is we can assign certain functionality to a single role. So we can say it's an admin role who has access to every functionality. We have an inventory role who have access to a single functionality. But basically, once the user authenticate and they access the system, we have to provide them a role. And the role usually is going to be a Boolean type. Do they have this role? Yes or no. As simple as that. So once the user has logged into the system and actually had the credentials there, we can see, okay, do they have the role? They have a role. If yes, they can actually continue using the system. If they don't have a role, we have to log them out. So it's similar to let's take the analogy of a driving license. So for example, let's say I want to drive a car. The first step that I need to do is to get a driving license. So if I don't even have a driving license, I'm not allowed to even do anything else. Even if my credentials is correct, I have all the right documentation, but I don't have a driving license, I'm not allowed to drive a car. So it's going to be as simple as that. So a role, we can think of it as like a driving license. Do I have access? Do I have permission to enter the system, or to even to, in the case of a driver license, to drive the vehicle? I don't even have the basic documentation, so I'm not even allowed to do anything. So we can see here, so do I have a role? Yes, I got access to the system. No, access is denied, I get out. Similarly here, do I have a driver license? Yes, I can drive the car. Well, there's more conditions than that, but if not, I'm not allowed to drive it. So basically, it's a set of permissions that I can use in order for me to access the system or execute some of the system functionalities. So what is a role? As we have said, it's basically the Boolean value of do I have access or not. And as we can see here, basically in more detail, so we have this user 2, we said, who has inventory role. So let's say the user have logged in and we have not set any role for them. So basically they cannot access anything in the system, so they log out. Because basically, even if their credential is correct and they don't have any roles, they don't have any business doing anything in the system. So we have to log out. Until we give them the correct role, they are not able to do anything. So as we can see from the system as well, we can have multiple roles. We can have admin. Basically, any single role that we might think of, we can actually create it and we can assign it in the system. There's no limitation on the type of roles that we can actually create and manage. So for this example right here, we have only created 2 roles, which is going to be the admin, which has access to every single one of the functionality, and we have the inventory role, which has a much more limited value or limited access inside the system. So that's basically a quick overview about what role is. We're going to be discussing in more deep inside the source code. We're going to be actually creating our codes, but this is the general overview of what role is. The next point that we're going to be discussing is what is claims. And basically claims are completely different than roles. Basically claims are more flexible than roles. Claims are basically a set of information that the user gets once they log in. So, for example, that's the user who have actually authenticated and they entered to the system and they got the role. Claims are basically a set of information that we attach to that user once they log in. So, for example, we give them their name, we give them their email, we give them certain set of access attached to them, and basically they are the information that they want us to know. So basically what the user is claiming to be. So, for example, in real life, in the real life scenario, for example, I can claim to be, for example, a programmer. So that's, for example, I claim for me. So I can claim my email address, which is mohamad@email.com. So these are my claims. And there's much more claims than that. But these are the simple examples that I can provide. And similarly here, once I log in, I get a role. For example, I can put actual claims. There's a lot of systems which actually don't use roles and actually assign claims to the users, and then based on the claims, they can give them authorization. You can actually do that, or you can actually use the two in conjunction together. And that's what we're going to be doing today. But just to do a quick summary, so claims is basically some set of information that I give about myself, and basically claims is basically a key value pair. So a key, for example, it could be email and the value is my email address. It could be phone and it could be my phone number. It could be, for example, age, and I can put my date of birth, for example, so on and so forth. So let's check back into our driver license example, and we can see how claims are actually embedded inside the driver license. So we can see here, this is the simple driver license that we had before. And basically, as we said, once I access to the system, I get a role. And in this case, we're going to say that I got my role as a driver license. But inside that role, I can have, for example, a lot of claims. And as we can see here from these black boxes, every single one of these is a claim. So for example, this is the first one, the DL is the driver license code. So that's the first claim. The second claim is the expiry date. The third claim is my last name, and then the first name, and then the date of birth, and the sex, and the height, and the weight, and the hair, and the eyes, and the class. So all of these are claims. Even though I have my role, I still need to provide a lot of claims. And these claims are basically a lot of information about the user itself. I'm not telling them here, oh, I need to, for example, grant all access. No, I'm just providing more information about the user, and based on this information that I'm actually providing about this user, I'm able to give that person additional functionalities or additional access. For example, inside this driver license exam, as we can see here, I have something called a class C. And for example, class C here can refers what types of vehicle I can drive. So even though I have a driver's license, I cannot just drive any single car that I want. For example, class C here refers to cars. I cannot drive tractors. I cannot drive planes. I cannot drive ships. I cannot drive a lot of stuff. I only am allowed to drive a single set of or a single type of vehicles, which is going to be cars. And this is only provided through a claims. So the first step was actually for me getting a driver license, and then my permissions being set through a claim inside the driving license with the class, which is going to be C in case of which actually refer to a car. And there's much more information. So I can use my driver license, for example, into a different sets of in different scenarios. So for example, let's say I want to go into a place and they require, for example, a certain age limit. I can actually provide my driver license as a verification, and they can give me and they can check my date of birth, and they can check my age is valid, and I can access or not. So for example, these types of information is available by claims, and these claims actually have some kind of conditions for me to access different types of different services. So my driver license, he acts as like a base to get more access to different stuff. So what does this mean in our coding sense? So we can see here, if we're going to transfer all of this information on top of it, we can see here in like a JSON format which is attached to it, which is going to be basically summarizing every single thing, which is going to be the driver license ID, expiry, last name, first name, date of birth, sex, hair, eyes, height, and weight, and class. So all of these informations are claims on top of the roles that I got, which is going to be, in our case, the driver license. So as we can see here, that claims and role work together in order for us to provide much more information about the user, and we can actually create a much more in-depth authorization system. So we're going to be also discussing in much more details claims inside the code. We're going to see how are we going to create them, how are we going to verify them, how are we going to authenticate and authorize, not authenticate, sorry, how are we going to authorize the user to access certain sets of functionality only based on claims as well. So what is a policy? A policy, basically, it's a set of rules and a set of guidelines that we need to check in order for us to actually grant the user access or not. So let's think about it this way. So first, inside the claims, we can check, for example, what type of class that the driver license has. Or for example, we can check if they actually has a driver license or not. So every single one of these is a rule. claim is a rule, if I have a driver license or not is a rule, so on and so forth. A policy is, we can think of it as like a set of these rules. So let's say we have 4 or 5 rules to access a single functionality. So let's say we have financial aspect to our application, and there's a lot of a lot of sensitive information there. So for example, I can think of a policy that could be like, oh, this person needs to be an accountant, this person needs to have high level of access inside the company to access this information, this person needs to have signed, for example, certain types of an NDA to not disclose the information that exists in our system. This person needs to have a certain level of access. So for example, he needs to be access, or she needs to be access level 3 or 4 in order for them to access these types of the system. They will need to have additional credentials to access the banking information, and so on and so forth. So all of these sets of rules, because we're going to be defining into a certain set of our system, or to be defining them to a certain aspect of our system, we can put them in a unique. So we can put them like a claims, and we can actually check every single one of claim. But the much better way in order for us to actually grant access to that system based on all of these sets of rules is to create a policy. And a policy, basically, they are a set of functions or a set of conditions or rules that we want to actually implement, and we want to give to a certain part of the system. So we can create, like, for example, a policy which has like 6 functionalities, 6 checks that we need to do. And if the user pass these 6 checks, they will be able to access the system. If they do not pass it, they will be rejected. So basically, that's the idea of a policy. It combines different sets of rules into a single policy, and then the user needs to pass that policy in order for them to actually access the system or not. So now let's understand this more back to our driver license or not. So the first policy is we're gonna call it allow to drive a car. So as we can see here, we have different checks that we need to do through this policy. So the first one, once we start, is does this user have a driver license? So that's the first check. If they don't have a driver license, they're not allowed. If yes, then we need to check the different condition, which is the driver license expired or not? So we can check also the date. If it's expired, then they're not allowed. If no, they go through the third check, which is going to be the driver license class, if it's equal to C or not. So if it's equal to C, they are allowed to drive a car. If it's not equal to C, then it's not allowed. So as we can see here, we have added 3 functions or 3 set of rules in order for us to create this policy to see if this user is allowed to actually drive the car or not. And we can see that we combined all of these sets of checks into a single policy. And once we assign this policy to that certain functionality, to a certain controller, to a certain action, the only users will be able to get access to these actions and to these controllers is through if they pass the policy checks or not. So if they passed it, they get access. If they don't pass it, they don't get access. So we're gonna also be checking policy inside the code and see how it's gonna be, how it's gonna work and how it's gonna all fit together. So what are the ingredients that we're gonna be needing today? We're gonna need Visual Studio Code, which is gonna be our code editor, and we're gonna be needing the .NET 5 SDK, because we're gonna be also building this on a previous project that we have already done, which is the to-do. So these were the main ingredients there. So we need the same thing here. And we're going to be needing the latest version of the source code, which is available on GitHub. The link is also going to be available in the description down below. Now let's jump into it. So the first thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be utilizing a project that we have worked on before, which is going to be a to-do list, which contain already the authentication, which basically going to be the JWT token as well as the refresh token. We're going to take that project and we're going to be building on top of that. So how are we going to be able to find that project? All we need to do is we need to go to GitHub. If you don't follow me yet on GitHub, please follow me there. And we can go to repository. Once you go to, the link's going to be github.com/Mohamad1087. These links going to be available in the description down below. And we go to repository. And we're going to scroll all the way down until we see V8 refresh token with JWT. And once we are in that project, all we need to do is click on code, and under SSH you can clone it any way you want. You can click on that, and let's go back to our terminal. And basically I'm gonna clone this project locally. Perfect. Now all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open this project in Visual Studio Code. Okay, great. Now some stuff is being downloaded, which is gonna be fine. Let's go to terminal and let's navigate to that project. cd v8. Then we're gonna go to the to-do app and let's do a .NET build. And if we navigate through the application, just like let's do a quick overview of what exists there. So first of all, let's go to the startup class. And from the startup class, we can see that we're already having some JWT configuration. We already have a DB context there. We already have the JWT secrets being embedded here. And then we are basically building the validation parameters. And then basically here we're adding the authentication and the JWT bearer token, setting up the identity, Swagger, which should be fine, opening the core so anyone can connect to it. And basically we have added the authentication and authorization. Perfect. So as we can see here that we have all of these configuration preset. This is a project that we have worked on before. If you want to watch that video, I'll also link it in the description down below or on the upper right hand side here, which give you a full overview how you can integrate the JWT and the refresh token into your project. So once we have already done that and we can see the application has built successfully, the first thing that we're going to be doing here is we need to go to the controllers folder, and inside the controllers folder we need to set up a new controller so we can actually add the roles and add everything that we want to do into that controllers. But before we do that, I just remembered that we need to add some stuff to the startup class so they will be able to recognize that we have roles we want to actually utilize. So ASP.NET Core will be able to recognize that we want to utilize roles inside our application. So what we need to do is inside the add default identity, we need to change that. So it's going to be add identity. And after identity user, we're going to add a comma and we're going to type identity role. And basically here, instead of utilizing the default identity, we are telling the identity framework inside ASP.NET Core that what actually we want is we need to utilize the identity and we want to embed roles inside this identity. So this is the first step that we're going to be doing. Let's save this. Let us build the project, .NET build. Perfect. Now the next step is we're going to go to the controllers folder. We're going to create a new class and we're going to be calling it setup controller. This is going to be only at the initial stages where we want to set up the project, set up the controller, set up the infrastructure for all of those. We're going to be utilizing this. So the first thing that we're going to do once we create this class, we're going to actually make it a controller by inheriting from the base class. So we're going to be controller base. And let us fix this reference. And then what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding the route. And basically the route, it's going to be similar to the other one. So it's going to be API / controller. And basically it's going to be something like this. API / setup. Okay, great. So once we have set up the route, we're going to set up that this is an API controller. So ASP.NET Core recognize it as an API controller. Let's save this. And now let us start initializing this controller. So how are we going to be doing that? So first we're going to create the constructor. So inside the constructor, what do we want to initialize? We want to initialize a couple of things. So the first thing we want to initialize is the DB context. So private read only API DB context, and we're gonna call it context. So this is the first thing. Let's fix those references and let's copy this and let's put it here, and we're gonna call this context and we can initialize it like this, context equal context. Okay, great. So the next one we're gonna be initializing is gonna be actually the user manager. So private read only user manager, and we're gonna specify the identity user by default. and then we're gonna put underscore user manager. Okay, great. Apologies. Okay, and let us fix those references. Okay, great. Now let's take this and we can initialize it, and it's gonna be without the underscore here, and then here we're gonna put underscore user manager equal user manager. Perfect. Then after that we're gonna be initializing the role manager, so it's private read only role manager. We're gonna utilize the identity role, and we're gonna put underscore role manager. Perfect. And we're gonna be doing the same thing here, so let's copy this and let's initialize it inside our constructor, and let's remove this, and this is gonna be underscore role manager equal role manager. Perfect. So the last thing that we wanna actually add, which is gonna be the logger, which is gonna be private read only iLogger. I think iLogger double G. Okay, and then we're just gonna pass the setup controller class. Yes, and we're gonna call it underscore logger. Now let's fix those references, and let's copy this, and let's add this here, and this is gonna be normal logger. Okay, without the underscore I mean, and we're gonna put underscore logger equal logger. Okay, perfect. Now that we have set up our controller, set up the constructor for our controller, we're gonna be first setting up some actions, and these actions basically they're gonna help us manage our roles. So the first action we're gonna be setting is we're gonna just get all of the roles that we currently have. So we're gonna put an HTTP get, and basically it's gonna be a public action result, and we're gonna call it get all roles. And the first thing we're gonna be doing is we're just gonna be querying all of the roles from our database. And because we have used the identity, ASP.NET identity, we know that it has automatically created the role table for us when we have did the initial migration. I have covered all of those, the initial migration, in the other video related to how to set up authentication utilizing ASP.NET Core identity management in the previous video. If you want to watch it, it will be similar to the one that I mentioned earlier. It's going to be in the description down below and on the upper right hand side somewhere. So we're going to put here roles equal underscore role manager dot roles dot to list, as simple as that. And let us fix this reference. Let's save this, and we're gonna put return okay, and we're just gonna return the roles. Okay, great. Now let us build this project. Should build successfully. Now let's run this. Okay, perfect. Now let us open it. Let us open Insomnia and let us actually test it there. Insomnia, and then basically we're gonna create a new request collection. We're gonna call it roles. Okay, let's call it roles management. Well, yeah, let's call it roles. Just simple as that. And inside here, let us create a new folder, and we'll call it this only gonna be for the setup controller. It's just a way to organize our calls. Put create, and inside the setup controller, we're gonna create a new request, and it's gonna be basically a get all roles. So we're gonna give it a name, and it's gonna be a get. So we're gonna create this, and now we need to pass the URL. So let's go back to Visual Studio Code. Let's copy this, and basically it's gonna be instead of these, because it's gonna create an issue. So we'll put localhost and /API/setup is the name of the controller, and that should be it. Now let us send this request, and what we get is correct. We don't have any roles added right now because we have just enabled it, and we got a 200. It means that it's able to connect to the API endpoint, and it's able to pull back the information. But because we don't have any current roles, it's going to return an empty array, which is expected. Great. Let us go back to Visual Studio Code now. Let's stop the application, and now let us try to add a role first. So after the HTTP GET, we're gonna be because we're gonna be creating, so it needs to be a post request. So we're gonna put an HTTP post, and then we're gonna put public async, because we're gonna make it an async await, and we're gonna make it a task, and we're gonna put action result, and then we're gonna call this create role, and all we're gonna be taking is the name of the role that we want to create. So before we continue, let us fix these references, and that should be fine now. Okay, great. So the first thing we need to do is we need to check if the role already exists, because if the role already exists, we don't want to create it twice. So that's the first check. And then the second check is we need to check if the role has been added successfully. I think that should be fine for now. Okay, so how do we check if a role already exists or not? It's very simple. So put var role exists, and again, if you guessed that we're going to be utilizing the role manager, you are correct. So we're going to put await underscore role manager dot role exist async, and basically here all it's going to take is the role name which we have, and what it does is going to check against it, and if it's going to return to us if it exists or not. So we're going to say if role exists, so it's basically the role exists is going to be a boolean true or false. So we're going to say if it does not exist, we're going to be continuing here, but in case it exists, let us move this inside, but in case it exists, we need to return a bad request for the user, because it means that the role already exists. So return bad request, and basically we're just going to return an anonymous object, and inside this anonymous object we're going to put error equal role already exists. So that way when we try to add a role that already exists, we can see that we know what's wrong with it, and we know that we're trying to add something that is already there. So now that we know that the role does not exist, so here let's put checks on the role exists status. Okay, so once we have done that, now we need to actually add the role, because we have made sure that the role does not exist. So how do we add the role? Also, it's very simple. So we could put var role result equal await underscore role manager dot create, and let's see what it takes. It takes basically here the role that we want to create, and it's gonna be very simple. So how do we create this role? We need to, if we look here, we can see that it takes let's check it again. It takes a new identity role, and this identity role needs to be passed to. So let's pass this identity role equal a new identity role, and basically inside this identity role we need to pass the name of the role that we want to build. We want to add, and that should be it. So here we can see that we have called the role manager, we have called the create async method, and the create async method basically require us to pass a new identity role, and this identity require us to pass the name of the role we want to create. So once we have added that, we need to check if the role has been added successfully, which is going to be this condition here that we have added. Let's put it here. And how do we check that? It's very simple, because the role result basically is has parameters to give us if it has created successfully or not. So put role result dot, and we can see here we have succeeded or not, which is going to be a boolean value. So if we utilize this, and basically if the role has been added successfully, we need to return a 200 with the user, with a message telling the user that the role has been added successfully. So first let's log it. So logger.log information, and basically we're gonna say here that let's utilize string interpolation, and we can say the role and we'll put name. And if you don't know anything about string interpolation, I have another video which can explain in detail how we can use string interpolation. I'm gonna link it also in the upper right hand side. So put the role name has been added successfully. Okay, great. And we're gonna also return here a 200, so we're gonna return an OK, and inside this OK, all we need to return an anonymous object, and this anonymous object is basically just gonna return a message, and we're gonna put it inside a result, and inside this result we're gonna also use the same string interpolation. We're gonna put the role, we're gonna pass the name of the role has been added successfully. Okay, great. So that's gonna be in case it actually has been added successfully. If not, we need to send back to the user telling them that the role has not been added successfully, and we can use here an else statement. And basically, let's take these and we can just rechange them. So instead of here has been added successfully, we're gonna say the role has not been added, and here instead of an OK, we're gonna return a bad request, and we're gonna return an error instead of a result, and here has not been added. Okay, so I think that should be fine for now. Let us build the project again and we can test it out. .NET build. Perfect, we succeeded. Now .NET run. Okay, great. Now actually let us go back to our tester, which is gonna be, I think, Insomnia. And let us create a new request. And we're gonna call this create role. And it's gonna be a post. And let us click on create. And basically let's put this inside here, and basically it's gonna be the same URL. Let's copy this from here and let's paste it, and we know it's gonna take a query, and it's gonna be basically the name, and the first role we wanna add is gonna be app user, so we can test it out, and I think that should be fine for now. And let's test it. So let's click on send, and we can see we got a 200, and we got the role app user has been created. This is not actually the endpoint, the status code that we want to get, because we are adding something. We need to return a 201, but for now we're just gonna be making it as a 200, and then we're gonna be updating it as we go. So let us now try the other endpoint, and now what we need to see is we need to see this app user coming back to us inside get all roles. So if we click on send, we can see here that we actually got the role back. We can see we got this ID, its name, and some other information, which is perfect. This is what we want. So the next step is, after we have added the get all roles and adding create a role, the next step for us is we need to add is get all users. So we can actually get the user that exists, and then we can actually assign roles to those users, and based on that we can actually implement the authorization. So let us go back to Visual Studio Code, and let us stop this application. And here what we're going to be doing is, after the post, we're going to be creating a new action, and this action is going to be HTTP GET, and it's going to have a route. So we're going to put a route, and we're gonna call it get all users. Simple as that. It's gonna be also public async task. Let's put a space. We're gonna put iAction result and get all users. And basically here, if you said we're gonna be utilizing the user manager, that's correct. So put var users equal await underscore user managers dot users dot to list. Simple as that. And now here what we need to do is, it needs to be to list async. Apologies. And let us fix this reference. all we need to do is return a okay with the users. Perfect. So let's copy this. Tell you what, let's build the project first. .NET build, and then .NET run. And now let's go back to Insomnia and let's create a new request. And we're gonna call it get all users. And it's gonna be a get, and we're gonna do a create. So let us copy this request here, copy. Let's paste this, and we're gonna, because we added a route, we need to add the action name. It's gonna be get all users. And because this is an old project, so we have already added users before. If you don't know how to do that, you can watch that video, or we can add a user later on. So let us send this request, and we can see we have already 2 users in our database. So we have Mohamad at email, and we have Mohamad at email111.com. So for simplicity's sake, we're gonna utilize Mohamad at Mohamad at email.com. Perfect. So the next action that we want to add is basically adding a user to a role. That's the second action that we need to do. So let us go back to Visual Studio Code, and let us stop this. And what we're going to be doing here is we're going to adding a post request, HTTP post. And what we're going to be doing is, because we're adding a post, so let us give it a route. It's going to be, I think, a good idea. And inside this route, we're going to put add user to role. Very declarative name. And we're going to put public async task action result, and I would add user to role. And basically what we're going to be taking is we're going to take the user's email, and we're going to take the role name. Simple as that. And then we're going to be doing some checks. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to check if the user exists. Then we need to check if the role exists. And then we need to check if the user is assigned to the role successfully. Okay, great. So let us start by checking if the user exists. To do that, if you thought about the user manager, you are correct. So we're going to put var user equal await user manager. Actually, it's going to be, I think, underscore user manager dot find by email, because we are passing the email, and we're going to pass the user's email. And here what we can do is we can put if user equal null. It means that the user does not exist. We're going to say user does not exist. What we're going to be doing is we're going to sending back a bad request. So return bad request, and we're going to be basically returning, we're going to create an anonymous object, and this anonymous object is going to return an error. And basically what we're going to be saying inside this error, user does not exist. Okay, great. And let's update the logger as well. So let's copy the same thing here, and let us paste it. And inside the log information, we're going to be saying here the user, and we're going to pass the email. The user with the email does not exist. Say does not exist. Okay, great. And so this is the first check that we want to do, if the user exists or not. And then we need to check if the role exists or not. And we can see here that we have already added the logic here, if the role exists or not. So let's just copy this, and we can build on top of that. So let us copy this here and paste it. And basically need to close this like this. Okay. And here it's going to be role name. And basically, so we're going to be doing if the role does not exist. Let's copy this, and let us basically update the error message. We're gonna say role does not exist, and the role we're just gonna put does not exist, as simple as that. And lastly, it's after we make sure that the role actually exists and the user exists, is we need to actually add the role to the user. This is gonna be very simple. So how do we do that? So first we're gonna create a new variable. We're gonna call it result, and it's gonna be equal to await underscore user manager dot add to role async, and basically we're gonna pass the user that we wanna add, which we have already added, we have already got, and we're gonna pass the role name. As simple as that. So this user here is the user that we have checked because it already exists. We have already got its information and the role name that we have, and basically if result.succeeded, it means that it has been added successfully. So this is the check that we have here. Let's copy this and let's add this here, and then we're gonna put here else it does not exist, didn't work. So let us copy this error from here, and basically we're gonna put this in the else here, and we're gonna say that the user was not able to be added to the role, and basically we know not anything from here. And let's us copy this, and we'll paste this here. And lastly, we're gonna just add this success message. So we're gonna put for now only return okay, and inside this okay we're gonna pass the success message, which is gonna be we're gonna just say let's create a new object. So we're gonna put a new, and we're gonna put result, and this result it's gonna be success. So return okay. Oh sorry, it shouldn't be like this. So this should be inside the okay, and let's put this here. Okay, great. Our success user has been added to the role. Okay, great. Perfect. So now let's test this out. So let's go back to our Insomnia and let us create a new request. So we're gonna call it add user to role, and it's gonna be a post, and put create. Let's copy this, and let's update the action name. So let's go back to Visual Studio. Let us get the action name. Let's paste it here, and let's update the queries. So we need two things. We need the email and the role name. So it's gonna be email, and it's gonna be a role name. Let's get the email of the users that we have. Let's take the first one, mohamad@email.com. And the role name was app user. So app user. And now let's send this and see what do we get. Or did we not run the application? Okay, let's run the application. So .NET run. Okay, great. Now let's go back to Insomnia and let us send the request. And we can say the user, you can see that it says the user does not exist. Okay, let's see why. So let's see here. So the username is this, email is Mohamad. Okay, so the email is different. There's a typo in the email. Let's update this. Let's go back and let's update this email. Okay, now let's send this. Okay, success, the user has been added to the role. Perfect. So let us try it with a wrong email again. So let's put this. Okay, great. The user does not exist. Now let's put a valid email but the wrong role. Still user does not exist. Oh, okay, let's remove the one. Role does not exist. Okay, perfect. So now we made sure that we have covered all of the scenarios that we have. Let us add, let's go back to Visual Studio Code. Let's stop this. And now let's add another method or action, which is going to be basically getting all of the user's role. So after this, we're gonna be basically adding a new method action, and we're gonna call it HTTP GET. And basically this is gonna also, we're gonna add a route for it, and we're gonna say get user roles, and it's gonna be public action result. Let's make it async task action result, and it's gonna be get user roles, and it's only gonna take the email of the user. So once we do that, the first thing we need to check if the email is valid, and then we need to return the roles. Pretty straightforward. So how are we going to do this? Basically similar to what we have done here to check if the email actually exists or not. So we can take this exactly same thing. We can paste it here. And once we have done that, we made sure that the user actually exists. The next step for us is we need to just get all of these roles and actually adding them, returning them to the user. So it's going to be var roles equal await underscore role manager dot get roles async get, I think it's not role manager, it's user manager. It's get roles async, and we need to pass the user, and we're just gonna pass user. And then once we do that, we're just gonna be returning okay, and we're gonna return roles. Perfect. So let's stop this application, let's build it, .NET build. Okay, now let's run it, .NET run. Okay, great. Now let's go back to Insomnia, and now let's add a new request, and we're gonna call it get user roles, and it's gonna be a get, and we're gonna do a create, and let's copy this and let's paste it here. Let's update this to get user roles, and we're gonna add a query which is gonna be the email, and it's gonna be the same email that we have here with the misspelled name. And let's send this, and now we should see app user returning for us. Perfect. So now that we have created this action, the next step is we're just gonna create another action to actually remove a user from a role. So let's add this as well. So let's go back to our Visual Studio Code, and after this we're gonna create a new action, and it's also gonna be a post. So because we're doing something, so HTTP post, and it's gonna have a route, and we're gonna call it remove user from role. Public async task action result remove user from role. So basically this is gonna take two things. First, it's gonna take the user's email that we wanna remove as well as the role. So we're gonna take first string email, and it's gonna be a string role name. So what are we gonna do here? First, we need to check that user exists. We need to check that the role exists, and then we need to remove it. So in order for us to do this, we already have done it when we added the role. So let's copy these, and let's add them here. So that should be fine because we are covering if the user exists and if the role exists. And once we have done that, the next step for us is to actually just remove the user from that role. And it's gonna be basically, you have to create a new var result equal await underscore user manager dot remove from role async, and basically we need to pass the user and we need to pass the role name, and that should be it. And once we have done that, we need to check if result dot is succeeded, sorry. It means that it worked, so we can return an OK with a new results, and we're gonna just say user has been removed from role. And let's make string interpolation so we can specify which role. So here we're just gonna put the role name, and here we're gonna specify the email of the user. So we'll put the email. Okay, great. And in case this did not work, let us return a bad request. So just copy this, and we're gonna say else bad request unable to remove user from role. As well, we're gonna put here the email of the user, and we're gonna add the role name. And let's make this string interpolation working by adding a $sign, and let's save this. Now let's stop this, and now let's run it again. .NET build, and then we're gonna put .NET run. Perfect. Let's go back to Insomnia, and let us add a new request, and we're gonna say remove user from role, and we're gonna be a post and create. And basically here we're just gonna take this, copy this, and we're gonna make it here. And then once that's done, email and role name. So we need to pass here the query email, and then we're gonna pass the role name, and the email is gonna be basically the same email, which is misspelled, and it's gonna be app user. So before we do this, let us get all of the roles for this user. So get user's role, and we can see here we get currently app user. So if we remove this, user was not able to be added to the role. Why? It should be added or removed. I think we're calling the wrong endpoint, so this one should be removed from. Apologies. So this one should be removed. Now let's send this. Now this, we should remove the user from the role. Okay, user Mohamad has been removed from the role. Perfect. Now if we get all of the user's role, this should be empty. Okay, great. So now that this has been completed, the next step for us is to right now maybe update the registration controllers in order for us every new user who register will be able to have the role automatically assigned to them. Okay, let's go back to Visual Studio Code, and let's go to the auth controller management, and let's look at the registration. Okay, we can see the user has already exists. We have created the user. So what we're going to be doing here is, before actually creating the JWT token for that registered user, we need to add the user to a role, and basically we're going to add all of them to the app user role that we have created. So let's do that right now. How are we going to be doing it? We have already seen here inside the setup controller that add user to a role. We have already created it, and it's going to be as simple as utilizing the user manager to add the user to a role. So let's do this here. So we're going to put var result role addition equal await underscore user manager dot add role async, and we're going to pass the user that we have just created. So it's going to be new user, and we're going to pass the role name, which is going to be app user, also we have just created. We don't really need to do this because basically it's a new user and the role already exists, so we know that's going to automatically be added successfully. So let's save this, and now that we have added this, the next step is let us register, and let us now investigate how we can actually add the roles to the JWT token once it's actually generated. So first of all, let us create a new user so we can actually add this automatic role to them once they are registered, and we'll take it from there. So let's save this. Let us stop the application. Let's run it again. Okay, great. Now let's go back to Insomnia, and I think this is called the auth management. So let's copy this one, and inside here let's create a new collection, new folder. We'll call it auth management. Okay, create, and inside the auth management we'll create the first request, which is going to be the registration. It's going to be a post, and it's going to require JSON body if I remember correctly. Let's see. So register, yes, it's going to require a JSON body. So let's see, what does it require? It requires a username, email, and a password. That's straight enough. So first of all, before we do that, let us create this. So what we can do is just as copy this here. So copy this, let's go here, and inside here we'll just instead of set up, it's going to be auth management. And this here is going to be a register. And then in the JSON body, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be actually creating it. And it's going to be first username. And we're going to make the username here something a bit different. Let's create a new user called Donald Duck. So it's going to be Donald at Disney.com. And what does it require? An email address. We're gonna put the email address the same. Email is gonna be Donald at Disney. If I can type Disney.com. And lastly, it's gonna require a password. So let us send a generic password, and we can just put it password, spot some characters here. Okay, so let us register this and let's see what we get. So registration, and we can see we have automatically got a JWT token. But if we go right now and inspect this JWT token, let's copy this, let's go back to our web browser, and let's go to jwt.io. And let us inspect the content of that JWT token. And as we can see here, we have already got the email, we got the GT, but we did not get the role. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be basically updating this. We need to update this payload, or the JWT token payload, in order for it to include the role, so we can actually utilize the roles management. So let's go back to our source code and let's stop this. Okay, so let's go back to auth management. And the first thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding some more initializers. So the first thing is going to be adding the role manager. So private read only role manager, and it's going to take identity role, and we're going to call it underscore role manager. Okay, great, manager. And then let's copy this and add it here under the user manager. That makes sense, and without the underscore here. And we're gonna put underscore role manager equal role manager. That makes sense. And let's add a logger, because we don't have a logger here. It's always good to have a logger inside our application. So it's gonna be private read only as well, iLogger, and it's gonna take the auth controller manager class, and we're gonna call it underscore logger. And let us fix those references. And now let's copy this and let's add it here to the initialization. And instead of the underscore, it's gonna be logger, and we're just gonna add it here. So it's gonna be underscore logger equal logger. Perfect. So the next step is, if we remember from here, we have a method which is called generate JWT token, which is going to be responsible for generating the JWT token. So let us inspect this. And inside here, we can see that it's already utilizing claims, which we're going to be delving more deep into later in this video. But we can see it's already being utilizing claims. And inside these claims here, this is where we need to add the role. but because we're gonna make it in a more generic way, so it will automatically pick up all of the roles. So we need to do some work here. So how are we gonna be doing that? So we're gonna create another method, and that method we're gonna be injecting it here. So after this, let us create here a new method, and this method we're gonna be basically call it get all valid claims, as simple as that. So private async, we're gonna make a task, and this is gonna return for us a list of claims, and we're gonna call it get all valid claims, as simple as that. And the only thing we need to pass here is the identity user. Excuse me, it has to be user here, and then we need to open this. So inside this, let's add a comment here, get all valid claims for the corresponding user. Okay, so what are we going to be doing inside this method? So first of all, we need to get all of the claims that belongs to that user, and then we need to get all of the roles that we need to set up, all of the claims that belong to that user, and then we need to get the roles and set it up for the user itself. And when basically once we have that, we need to inject them back into the JWT token that we are generating. So first thing first, we need to generate the options. So far, let's make it underscore options equal new identity options. If I can type options. Okay, great. So this is the first thing we need to do. And now we're gonna basically create a list of claims. So var claims equal new list of claims. That's what we want. And then once we have that, we need to start filling those claims. So something easy we can do is we can just take the claims that actually exist right now, because we're gonna be having them. So let's remove these and let's adding them here. So as we can see here, we have the 4 claims that we had before, which is gonna be the ID, the email, the sub, the JT. And if we go back to our web browser, we can see that these are it: ID, email, sub, and JT. And these are automatically being generated by JWT. It's not something for us to worry about. This is the expiry, this is the IAT, and this is the NBF, which is fine. So what are we going to be doing after we added this? We need to add some more claims to it. So once we have done that, the next step for us is we need to get any claims that has automatically been added to that user. In case we have any claims that has been automatically assigned, we need to get them and add them to this list of claims. So var user claims equal await, and it's gonna be underscore user manager dot get claims, and we're gonna basically pass the user that we want to get the claims for. And once we've done that, we're gonna put claims dot add range, because it's a list of claims. We're gonna add the user claims that we got. Perfect. So once we have done that, the next step is, so let's make a comment of what we're doing here. Getting the claims that we have assigned to the user. And then after that, basically what we're going to be doing is we need to get the user role and add it to the claims. Simple. So we're going to be utilizing the get user roles method under the user manager. So var user roles equal await underscore user manager dot get roles. Async is also going to take a user. So basically here, just because this is a list of user roles, we need to convert them into claims so we can actually add them to the claims. So how are we going to do that? Because it's a list, we need to loop through it. So it's going to be for each var role in user roles. And basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to do claims. We have the list of claims there, dot add new claim. And as we remember, claims are basically more information about the user. So claim type dot role, and it's gonna be basically role. Okay, great. And once we have done that, let us do this var underscore so let's call this user role, makes more sense. And here we're gonna put role equal await underscore role manager dot find by name async, and we're just gonna pass the user role to it. So we need to find the actual role, and we're gonna do if role is not equal to null, what we're gonna be doing is gonna be put var role claim equal await underscore roles manager dot get claims, and we're gonna pass the role. And then basically if there is any claims attached to that role, we need to also add it. So it's gonna be for each, similar to have one done before, it's gonna be var role claim in role claims. I'm gonna put the claims dot add role claim. Okay, let us explain what happened here. So first thing what we did is we created an options identity options, and then we created a list of claims, and this list of claims was exactly the one that we had before inside the generate JWT token method. And once we have done that, what we did is we needed to see if that user in specific has already some claims that has already been added for him before, and if that claims has already been added for that user before, we are just getting all of those claims and automatically adding them to the list that we had before. Once we have done that, the next step for us is we need to add the actual user role to those claims. So what we do there is we actually checked the identity provider. We told them we have this user, what role does this user have? Once we have gotten the list of roles that the identity provider had for that user, we can see here called user roles. Once we have got all of those, what we did, because they are actual roles, not claims, what did we do? We actually looped through them, all of the roles. And once we loop through all of the roles, we are just taking the user role and we're adding a new claim for that user role. So in our case, that user that we have just added, which is Donald, has a role app user. So we're getting the user app, we're getting the app user role, and we're attaching it to a claim. So once we have done that, the next step is just to make sure that we are covering all of AspNet in case we have added more claims to that specific role. So any user who anyone who has the app role app user role will have additional claims. So basically what we are able to do is for every role we can add additional claims. So let's say, for example, for role app user, I want to add the claims that they are employees. I want to add another claim that they work with department 123, for example, or they work, for example, in the department customer support, or for example they have access to the reporting, for example. So I can add all of these claims inside that app user. So for every person who have the role app user will automatically inherit all of these claims that we have attached to that role. So that's what we're doing here. So once we have added the role as a claim to that user, we are checking all of the first of all, we're checking if the roles actually exist, which should exist, just like a safety measures, which makes me think here we need to change a bit of the order, which we're going to be doing next. And then after we have checked the role already exists, we have got all of the claims that actually belong to that user, to that role. And once we have gotten all of the claims that belong to that role, what the next step that we did is we actually attached them to the list of claims that we have already created before. And now let's just do here like a small change in the order. So once we do this, and let's add this here, because basically why not? And once we have done this, the last step that we need to do is basically just return the list of claims. So after the for each that we currently have, all we're going to be doing is return claims. As simple as that. And now once we have this method ready for us, we're going to be basically injecting it back into the create JWT token. So before this one here, let us utilize it. So var claims equal, I think it was called, what did we get, all valid claims. So let's use this, get all valid claims, and we're gonna pass the user. And then here, as simple as that, what we're gonna be doing inside the subject, we're gonna be basically updating it so it will take full advantage of the claims that we have automatically generated. So instead of having here a list of empty claims, so let's delete this, and we're just gonna put claims. As simple as that. And here inside this claims, what's the issue here? We can see that that's an await method. Okay, so we need to make this await, and that should be working fine. Okay, perfect. So now what we did is we upgraded our claims functionality inside the registration and inside the auth management in order for us to take full advantage of the roles and the claims. So let's build this .NET build. Now this should build successfully. And let's do .NET run. Perfect. And now let us do sign in with that user account. So let's go back to Postman. And what we're gonna be doing here is we're just gonna new request, and I'm gonna call it login, and it's gonna be of type post, and it's gonna be of JSON. And basically let's take this and let's update it to login, and let's take the same JSON, but we're gonna remove the username. But before we do that, let us double check if it's actually, this is the body for the login. So let's go to the login method. So this is login. Let's see the user login request model, and we can see it only takes email and password, so we don't really need the username. So right now, if we log in and we get all of the information correctly, we should receive a JWT token, which is going to be containing all of the claims, including the role. So let's send this request. And we can see we got a JWT token. So let's copy this JWT token, and let's go back to our web browser, and let's delete this, and let's add this. And we can see here that we have the role have automatically been added for us. So right now the JWT token that we're sending has automatically attached the role that we have to this JWT token. So now once we have one add authorization to any of the other controllers, we can actually add authorization based on the role. Perfect. So we are exactly where we need to be. So the next step for us is let's go back to Visual Studio Code. Let us stop this. And for the to-do controller, what we're going to be doing is let us enable the authorization again, and let us add the role here. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be basically logging in with a user who doesn't have the app user attached to it, which I think we have already have before. And once we log in with that user, because it doesn't have the role attached to it, if we try to call any method inside this to-do controller, it's going to give us a 403 and unauthorized request. But we're going to log in then with a Donald account, because they have the actual role enabled into it. They will be able to see all of the information. So let's do that now. So since we enabled this, the next step is we're going to be adding a new comma, and basically we're going to be specifying the role, and we're going to make it app user. As simple as that. So as soon as I added here the word roles, because I can add multiple roles to the authorization, but now I only have one, which is app user. As soon as I added this, no matter which requests come to this API, so let us run it, and I'll explain it while it's being run. So .NET run. So let's go back to Insomnia, and let's create a new folder here, and we're gonna call it to do. As simple as that. Let us create a new request. We're gonna call it, what are the requests inside this? Get items. So we'll call it get items. It's gonna be a get. And let's take the same thing, copy this, paste it here. We don't need any of this. It's just gonna be to do. and it's going to be a GET. So right now we should see an unauthorized request 401 because we did not send any JWT token with it at all. So if we look at the headers here, we don't have anything in the headers. It means that we're not authorizing anything. So what we're going to be doing is, let's take this. So let's copy all of this. And let's go here inside the header, inside the get items, and inside the header, we're going to type authorization. And basically, in order for us to add the JWT token so we can authorize our request, we have to put bearer. And then we need to paste the JWT token that we have. And now let's click on send. And we still got a 401. I wonder why. So let us go back here. And let us see what are we trying to do. So again, let us make sure that this is the latest one. Make sure it's not expired. So let us send this. Let's take this again. Copy. Let's come here, space this, send, and maybe the JWT token has expired before because this is a new one. We can see that we got all of the to-do list available for us. Great. So I think we already, let's go back first here to the auth management, to the setup control, get all users. We already had these two users before. To be honest, I can't really remember the name, the password for them. I have an idea, so let us go back to our source code. Let's stop this. Inside the auth management, let us just for now, let us comment out the adding to the user. We create a new user without the role. Let's comment this out. So right now, anything we register, any user we register will not have this role. So Donald will have the role, and now we're gonna create the Mickey user who will not have this role. So JSON, so it's gonna be Mickey, and they're gonna share the same password. Send, registration has been successful. Now if I take this, if I go to get items and I update the bearer token, the one that Mickey has now I should get a forbidden because that user did not have the role embedded in it. So right now, what we did here is once we have added this simple sentence here, roles app user, the only people who are able to actually utilize these controllers, if they are first are able to who have an account, and second, who have a role attached to their account, which is called app user. If you have an account but you don't have the role, you are not able to access it. Okay, great. So once we have added this, now we have illustrated the abilities to have role inside our JWT token. The next step for us is we're going to be actually adding custom claims and basically adding the ability for only some users who have actually added those claims to them to be able to access some certain actions. So how are we going to be doing that? So inside our controllers folder, we're going to be creating a new class, and this class we're going to be calling it claim setup. Controller. And basically what we're going to be doing is basically what we did before. It's going to be controller base. And here what we're going to be doing is we're going to make it API controller. And let's copy this from here. It's going to be similar to this one. And to make it a bit faster, we're just gonna copy all of these and just update the controller, the constructor's name. So let's copy this and let's paste this here. And instead of setup, it's gonna be claim setup. And let's fix all of these references. First reference, second reference, and third reference. And instead of setup, it's going to be claim setup for the logger. Okay, great. So once we have done that, similar to what we have done with the roles, we're going to be basically getting all of the available claims. So it's going to be HTTP GET. And we're just going to put public async task iAction result get all claims. and we're gonna get all the claim for a certain user. So let us fix these references. And basically what we're gonna be doing here, we're gonna be utilizing the user manager as always so far. User equal, tell you what, let's get implement the same checking of the users. So get role here. So let's do this. It's gonna be the same checking. No need to rewrite it again. So just copy paste it. And once we make sure that the actual user is valid, let us actually just get all the claims so far. User claims equal await underscore user manager dot get claims async, and we're just gonna pass the user. And once we have done that, all we need to do is return it. So we're gonna return okay user claims. And once we have done that, we're gonna stop this .NET build. We're gonna build this project .NET run. And right now let's go back to Insomnia, and we're gonna be creating a new folder. We're gonna call it claim setup, and inside this claim setup we're gonna create a new request, and this request get all user claims. It's gonna be a get create. So let's just take the same URL, copy, paste this, just update the controller name to claims setup, and we need to pass the actual string, which is email. So here under query we just put email, and we're gonna take, I think let's get all users. I think let's take Donald's email. Yeah, let's take Donald's email, copy this, and we'll paste it here. And now because Donald does not have an email, it should be empty. Perfect, this is exactly what we wanted. Now let's go back to our Visual Studio Code and let's stop this. What we're gonna be doing right now is we're gonna be adding claims to the user. So we're gonna add it, it's gonna be HTTP post, and then it's gonna be route, and we're gonna call it add claims to user, and it's gonna be public async task action result add claims to user. And basically here we need to pass the string, which is going to be the email, as well as a string which is the claim that we want to pass, and what is the claim value, because as we said the claims are key value pair, so we need to have a key and we need to have a value. So claim value, and the first thing that we're going to be doing is similar to what we have been doing before. Let's check if the user actually valid. So paste this here. Let us do a refactoring as well, since we're already doing this. After we do all of the finish this controller, let's do a refactoring specifically for this one here. So let us actually okay, let's do it. So once we have done this, the next step for us is we just need to actually add a claim to that user, and it's gonna be very simple. So how are we gonna be adding a claim? So first it's gonna be var user claim. We need to create this claim first. It's gonna be equal to new claim, and this claim basically, let's fix those references so we can see the options. And this claim is first is gonna take the name, and then it's gonna take the value. So we're gonna take claim name, and if we put comma, we're gonna take the value, claim value. So now we have created a claim just based on the name and the value that the user has provided. And then once we have done that, all we need to do is add this claim to the user. So in order for us to do that, it's gonna be var result equal await underscore user manager dot add claims async, and we're just gonna pass the user, and we're gonna pass the new user claim that we have created. As simple as that. And once we have done that, we can check the result. So if result dot succeeded, we can just return okay new, and here we can just get a result, and let's use string interpolation. We're gonna say user, specify his email or her email, so result, their email, result dot, not result, sorry, user dot email has a claim. Let's add here, it's gonna be claim name, I don't want the value, added to them. That's it. And in case something goes wrong, we're just gonna put return bad request, new anonymous object, new anonymous object, and this anonymous object is gonna be a simply an error, and it's gonna be unable to add claim to the user.email, and here we'll just put a claim name, and let's enable string interpolation, and let's save this, and now let us try to build this. So .NET build should be easy. Okay, great. Now .NET run. Okay, great. So this is gonna called add claims to user. Let's go back to Insomnia, and let's add new request. I'm gonna call it add claims to user, and it's gonna be a post, nobody. And let's take this, let's paste this here, and it's gonna be called add claims to user. And the query is gonna take, as we can see, email, claim name, and claim value. So email, claim name, and claim value. And for example, for the email, let's take the Donald email that we already have. For the claim name, what should we add a new claim for this user? We can just call it department, and we'll call it sales, for example. Anything we want. And let's test it out. So let us send this, and let's see what we get. So it says that, okay, we remove the actions name, which is claim setup. And let's add this here, and let's send this. Perfect, we got a 200. The user Donald at Disney.com has claim department added to them. And now if we get all user claims that we have added before, it was empty, and now we should see departments added to them. So we can see type department and value is sales. So right now, if we log in with a Donald account, we should see this inside the JWT token. So let's go to the login, and let us go to the JSON, and let us log in right now. And let us take this JWT token, and hopefully we should be able to see that inside the, let's go to our web browser inside here. So let's open this, delete it. Inside here, the payload, we should see the claims added. And as we can see here, we have the department automatically been added to that payload, which is exactly the outcome that we wanted. So now we have department, which is a custom claim that we have added, and we have added the role as well. Perfect. The next step for us is we're gonna be adding right now a custom filter or custom authorization on a certain action, so only the users who have these claims will be able to actually access it. So let us go back to Visual Studio Code, and let us stop this. And the next step for us is, as we said, we're gonna be adding this claim to the action. But how are we gonna be doing that? If you remember from the slide, we said that every claim that we have, or every authorization request that we have, are actually actions belong to a certain policy. And because they are only one, we can call them claims, but in general, they are all part of a main policy. A policy is a set of rules or set of action that we have. So in order for us to utilize the claim authorization, we have to create a policy. And this policy will only have this claim available to it. So let us do this right now and we'll see how it's being implemented. So first of all, we need to go back to the startup class, and inside the startup class, inside the services, we need to add services dot add authorization, and we must have the options, and inside the options here, basically let us close this. We're gonna actually identify new policy. So options dot add policy, and we're gonna call this, what did we call the new claim that we have created? I think it was department, but let us double check. Let us check the query. Yes, it's called department. So we're gonna call it department, as simple as that. So we're gonna call it department policy, as simple as that, policy. And what we're gonna be doing here, once we have created it, is we need to create the actual policy, and using link expression, we're gonna be policy, and we're gonna require a certain claim, and that claim is gonna be department. As simple as that. So let us explain this. So in order for us to utilize claims, we need to make them as an authorization. We need to make them part of policies. And this is what we're doing here. We have created inside our startup class, we went into the configure services method. And inside of it, we have utilized the add authorization. And then inside the add authorization, we added a new option. And this option here is actually basically attaching a policy, or basically creating a policy. And for this policy that we are creating, we are attaching certain claims. And in our case, we have created a new policy we call the department policy, and we are requiring that this policy will require to have a certain claim attached into your JWT token in order for you to actually run through it and actually be able to utilize it. And this claim that has to be inside the JWT token is called department. So once we have done that, let us save this. Let us just build to make sure that it builds successfully. So .NET build. And once we have added this, it's running. Now let's go back to the to-do. And basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to update the create item. So only the users who have that claim attached to them will be able to actually create an item. As simple as that. So what we're going to be doing here inside the post, we're going to put authorize, because the authorize is going to basically wire up into the authorization framework. And basically, instead of having roles as we had before, we're going to put policy, and we're going to be specifying the policy that we have created into the startup class, which is called department policy. And all we need to do is paste it here and save this. And once we have done that, let us build the application and see what do we have. So .NET build, and then .NET run. Okay, great. So now let's go back to our Insomnia. And inside the to-do, we're going to actually add a new request. And this one is going to be create item, which is going to be HTTP post. So create item. And as we said, it's going to be a post, and it's going to require a JSON. And let's see what is the body of this. So we'll go to definition. It's going to have an ID which automatically generated, a title, a description, and a done. So JSON. Let's create it here. It's gonna have first a title. We're gonna call it claim item test. Oh no, let's call it, for example, something more valid of a to-do list, like do homework. And let's put here claims. And then we're gonna give a description. And this description is checking if claims authorization is working. And then we have to give it, what was it, done. Let's make it here like this, done. And it's gonna be false. And let us take this to do. And it's a post. And for the header, let's take the same JWT token that we had, and it's going to be authorization as well. And let's send this. I think the JWT token has expired. Let's try it out. It has expired, so let's log in again with the same account. I think it's Donald. Yes. Let's take this, copy, let's go to create item, let us paste it in the header, and let's paste it here, and let's send it. And we can see that the item has automatically been created for us, and we got a 201 created, 2 homework claims. So right now, if I get list of all of the items, we should see it there. Let us update this JWT token because it requires it. Send. We can see it's actually getting all of this correctly. Perfect. So right now, let us create another user, normal registration, and this user will not gonna have this claim, but will have that role, and we can actually check it from there. So we have, let's call this one Richard at Disney, and similar to this one. So right now this will, let's see if we enable that role again here. So inside the auth management registration, okay, we have already enabled that role. So let's register Richard, and let's take this. So right now, if we try to add a new item, it shouldn't work because Richard does not have the claims added to them. So let us go here and let's add this do homework, or actually let's put wash the car. It's working, and we're gonna put here V2 just out of curiosity's sake, and this ID should be 16 if it works. If not, we should get unauthorized. So let's send this, and we got an unauthorized because this user, which is Richard, does not have the claim attached to them. Okay, perfect. Now that we have covered all of this scenario, policies, basically we have already covered it here, but if you want more in-depth policy implementation, please let me know in the comments down below, and I create a video on that. So let's do a quick overview of what we have accomplished today, and so we can do a quick recap. So let's go back to our source code. So the first thing that we've done here, let's go first through the startup class. So through the startup class, the first thing that we have done is we have updated our identity from default identity to integrate roles. And then what we did is we have created a new controller called setup controller, where we'll be able to actually access the role manager. And the first thing we created is created an action which got us all of the roles. Then we have created another action which create the roles that we needed. And then we have created a method which gets us all of the users that exist inside our identity manager. And then we created another action which add a role to a certain user. And then we have added another functionality which is going to be get users role. So if we send the user's email, we'll get the list of roles. And lastly, we have created the ability to remove user from certain roles. Once we have done all of this, we have updated our auth management controller, firstly by integrating the role here inside the inside the initialization of the controller. And once we have done that, we have updated the registration by actually every time a user registers will automatically be added to a certain role. And then we have updated the generate JWT token method. And because this method is being utilized by the register and login, so we only had to do the work once. And then basically what we did here is inside this JWT, we removed all of the hard-coded claims, and we created this new method, get all valid claims. And this method basically is, I don't think we utilize the options here. I think, yeah, we can remove the options. So once we have created this here, what we did is we have created a list of all of the claims that we already had, and then we have got all of the claims for that user based on them. So we have attached the claims for them, and then we added them to the list of claims. And then basically what we did is we got the roles of the user and we made it as a claim. And then if there was any claim attached to that role, we have also added to that user, which is great. And then we have returned it and we have integrated with the JWT token. So once that was done, we have added the authorization here inside the to-do controller all the way on top. So right now anyone who has a role app user will be able to access this controller. And once that has been done, the next step for us is to create the setup, the claim setup controller, which is actually only dedicated for the claims. It's a very simple controller. What we did here is the first one, we get all the claims for a certain user, and the second one is adding claims to a certain user. As simple as that. Very simple implementation. And once we have done that, we wanted to implement authorization for that claims that we have integrated. So in order for us to do that, we need to implement a policy. So if we go to the startup class, we have implemented a policy, which is this one, and we have called it department policy, and we added that the the claim which is required is department, and then basically as simple as going back to the to-do controller and added the authorization for a certain policy there, and now we are able to actually add those policies back to the user. Perfect. As simple as that, we have created and implemented authentication and authorization for this application. Again, please, if you have any questions, write them in the comments down below. Please like and share and subscribe if you like this video. It will really help the channel. Have a great day.